It may seem obvious, but reading fairy tales can be one of the best ways of improving your ability as a writer. Fairy tales are often associated with a children's bedtime story, or older stories that bear little relevance to our modern lives, but this couldn't be further from the truth. There's a reason why Disney used fairy tales for the basis of most of their stories, why psychologists often use them to explain complex human behaviors and emotions, and why many, many books and movies have been inspired by the teachings and narratives of folk tales. This is because one of the key qualities that we'll come to see in this video is the timeless nature of fairy tales, how they tap into some of the most fundamental aspects of human life, how they teach us a moral lesson, utilize great structures, and combine all of this to create memorable and much beloved tales. First and foremost, as a structural writer, fairy tales are great for helping you understand what a clear and coherent narrative structure looks like. They are simple and recognizable by trait, with clear beginnings, middles, and ends, as well as containing obvious protagonists and antagonists, conflict, motivations, and themes. These structures carry throughout time, repeated again and again in various forms. The ancient Greek story of Rhodopis, the Vietnamese tale of Tam and Cam, Cenerentola from Italy, Aschenputtel in Germany, and eventually the Cinderella story that we know now, all contain incredibly similar narrative structures, with secret younger siblings marrying kings despite jealous step-siblings and oppressive parents. By understanding these stories, we can identify trends in narrative structures that all of these timeless fairy tales share, use that to craft simple and compelling narratives ourselves, and ensure our own story is logical, clear, and memorable. Continuing the memorability aspect, fairy tales allow us to see clear characterization that provides us with memorable and standout characters. Typically, fairy tale characters represent archetypes that many modern psychologists now point to when identifying types of people. This is because fairy tales tend to produce larger-than-life characters, with exaggerated behavior and traits that make them stick in our minds as unique personifications of certain attitudes. As a writer, this can be a great basis for creating characters that our readers remember. We can focus on the traits that make them stand apart from others, while also having an applicable and deeper inference for the real world that the reader can relate to. We have probably all met somebody who reminds us of the cunning of the big bad wolf, of the callousness of Hansel and Gretel's stepmother, the kindness of Kaguya Hime's adoptive parents, the refusal to grow up in Peter Pan, or the sharp thinking in Penelope in the Odyssey. All this brings us to what fairy tales do very well. Again, something that psychologists and historians love, thus securing their longevity while also simultaneously making them complex, interesting, and broadly applicable throughout the ages. That is, their inherent use of symbolism. Fairy and folk tales often use symbols and metaphors to convey deeper meanings and themes. Understanding how to use symbols effectively can add real depth and meaning to your own stories, allowing them to be more widely accessible and applicable in the future. One of the primary purposes of these tales is to instruct people in how they should behave and to find deeper meaning in things that may appear arbitrary at first glance. Ariel from the 19th century Danish tale The Little Mermaid has the mermaid transform from fish tail to human legs to represent her desire to have a new life and identity. Little Red Riding Hood's hood symbolizes her innocence and vulnerability, eventually stripped away by the wolf, which represents danger and temptation. Or the approaches that the three little pigs take to building their house symbolizes different ways that you can live your life: laziness, quick fixes, or hard work. Almost ubiquitously with fairy tales, they are often set in distinct fantasy worlds, with their own rules and systems. Studying these stories can help you get a stronger grasp of how to build vivid and interesting settings that can grip and draw in your reader. Wonderland from Alice's Adventure is filled with unusual creatures and nonsensical events that seem to have their own rules, apart from our own, and this creates a unique and memorable experience for our reader. By studying fairy tales, you can see how to create worlds that mimic our own, what elements you need to include and clarify, what can be implied or inferred, or what you can leave out entirely. The habit of world building can often be to over-explain the setting, making it dry and without intrigue. Studying fairy tales can show you a way to build interesting worlds in a short and expressive manner. 1001 Nights, or Arabian Nights, is another great example of weaving fantastical elements into a familiar-feeling world, with details taken from various Middle Eastern cultures. Similarly, Anansi the spider from West African folklore is another example of a mystical world filled with talking animals, mythical creatures, and magical events. Finally, fairy tales are a great way to understand how to deliver a moral lesson to your reader. We've talked about how applicability is more important than allegory, but we should note that allegorical narratives can be great stories too. Folktales so often have clear moral lessons that can help you understand how to incorporate themes and messages into your own writing. They can teach you how to use storytelling as a vehicle for a message without being too heavy-handed or dictatorial or preachy. They are timeless examples of how to communicate a message clearly, without alienating all of your audience by propagandizing your particular viewpoint, something that has plagued writing ad infinitum. The Boy Who Cried Wolf teaches us the importance of honesty. Casagiso teaches us the importance of being kind in order to be happy. The Magic Paintbrush shows us the importance of generosity and the danger of greed. So remember, you have a vast resource of inspiration and fantastic examples of storytelling at your fingertips. These are ancient, memorable stories that have survived for generations for a reason. Do not neglect them. Use them, learn from them, and make your stories even more amazing.